Welcome back. So, yesterday I did a vignette on surprise, and there was one more thing that I wanted to comment on. So, this is just a brief addendum, and that had to do with spectroscopy. And so, this might be entitled Spectroscopy and Surprise, or Surprise and Spectroscopy. And the idea is that when we achieve mastery over our understanding of problems, such as the energy levels of atoms and molecules, or the force extension properties of DNA, which is the example I'm going to use here, when we achieve that mastery, we can actually turn it into a technological tool that we can use when we go out into the world to investigate other things. And you must know this in all sorts of different ways. The use of spectra as a way at this point to do everything from understanding the 21 centimeter line of hydrogen in astrophysics, if I'm remembering correctly, to the advent of really, really precise clocks and so on. The thing I wanted to talk about here, because it really touches on the subject of physical biology, is this beautiful paper from 1994 that was done by Carlos Bustamante and Steve Smith and John Marco and Eric Sidja and I forgot who else, maybe Doug Smith, on the entropic elasticity of lambda phage DNA. And so this is a two-pager. This is the first page and this is the second page. And what they do in this paper is they measure the force extension properties of the DNA. And you can see here that this was a paper that appeared in Science Magazine. And so, what's the picture? What's the concept here? The concept is that there's a piece of DNA. The piece of DNA is basically something like 32 microns long, which is two of these lambda phage DNA molecules back to back. And then what they did is they used an optical trap, for example, and pull on it, and then they measure how much force it takes to get a given level of extension. And that's what's shown in the graph. And we can ask questions about the contour length and how long it gets and how much force it takes. Note the axis is femtonewtons. So 1,000 femtonewtons is 1 piconewton, and that makes good sense. The kinds of force scales that you see in these optical trapping experiments is something like 5, 10 piconewtons. Excuse me. One thing I want you to notice is that the force extension properties of this thing, it's basically a Hookean spring where the spring constant is proportional to the temperature, which is really a very fun and interesting aspect of an entropic spring. But coming back to the subject of surprise, the thing I wanted to say was, now we have such mastery of this force extension business in this context that we can use this to calibrate our optical traps, for example, or as shown in this beautiful experiment by Antoine van Ooyen, one of my all-time favorite experiments. Here what they did is they used the differences in elasticity of double-stranded and single-stranded DNA to read out the rate of replication. And the logic of the experiment shown in the upper left, you see a piece of DNA that's tethered to a surface. There's a bead at the end. There's a flow pointing in the right-hand direction. And then what happens is the replication machinery starts to come along and copy the DNA, but only on the leading strand, leaving in its wake some single-stranded DNA. And so the farther this replication machinery moves, the more single-stranded DNA is left in the wake, and the less double-stranded DNA is in front of the replication apparatus. The springiness of single-stranded DNA is larger than that of double-stranded DNA, so this thing basically retracts, is the way that you should think of it. And so you can use the rate of retraction as a way to read out the dynamics of replication. And what's my point? My point is that mastery, not surprise, but mastery, it can be used as an engineering tool. Once that mastery is in hand, then we can take it and use it to do other interesting things and create knowledge. This particular graph comes from Antoine van Ooyen's paper, but we redid it so that we could put it in our BioNumbers website and book, because it's a really great way to measure the rate of replication. So the summary point was just to reiterate what I said in that previous vignette about the necessity of finding new measurement tools, and often those measurement tools are kind of spectroscopies, and those spectroscopies come from diligently mastering a given methodology, and it's not about surprise. It's about knowing things, and I guess I'm definitely a fan of knowing stuff.